Let's try that. Hey, everybody. It's good to be here with you today. I'm glad to see all your smiling faces, at least those that are showing them, and those that aren't. I assume that that's for your own reason. But I'm glad to see that we've got a crowd that's come in to talk about these things. So, we're building up to really nail down some of these, what these texts are really saying to us. I think it's important that we continue to search and dig, and so I'm really anxious to see what some of your thoughts are on the material that we've covered so far. We've actually covered quite a bit, and we touched on some things peripheral to the discussion. You know, we talked a little bit about Malachi. We got into a little bit of Isaiah chapter 40. I guess I'm really okay if you want to go into any of those things. So this is your time. The reason we do this is because I'm interested in hearing from you, and I hope that some of you can bring some of your comments, your thoughts, your questions, your concerns. I do from time to time get people that are a little bit antsy, as we say, over some of these classes. So if that's you, let me know about it. Hey, Todd and Angel, Shabbat Shalom. How are you?
Shabbat Shalom, Ross. I had a little comment right off the bat here on something you read at the very end of the class.
Yep.
To start off with, though, when you was reading chapter 27, you mentioned 5 through 7 with the sacrifices was probably added in. I kind of caught that right off the bat when you read it.
Yep.
But one of the last things you read, let's see, the 2 Chronicles 23:18, and I caught this as soon as you read it. Or it said, David had assigned priests over the house of the Lord to offer up burnt offerings as prescribed in the teaching of Moses. But he wrote in Psalm 51, you do not want me to bring sacrifices. You don't desire burnt offerings. True sacrifice to God is a contrite spirit. So which one's right?
Look, hey, that's a great lead in. Let me while we're in Psalm 51, I hope everybody went to Psalm 51 when you said that.
It's 16 in the Bible, it's 18 in the JPS.
That's right. But look at Psalm 51. And like to your point, Todd, if you read through Psalm 51, you're getting this very pure, non-sacrificial approach to God, okay? So, for instance, in Psalm 51:9, purge me with hyssop till I'm pure. Wash me till I'm whiter than snow. Let me hear tidings of joy. Let my bones have, you have crushed exult. Let's see, you just keep going on and on. There's nothing about sacrifice. Listen to this. You don't want me, as you just said in verse 18, you don't want me to bring sacrifices. You don't desire burnt offerings. True sacrifice to God is a contrite spirit. God, you will not despise a contrite and crushed heart. Now get this. Then it says, this is where people say, Ross, you're not being fair. You didn't read the whole chapter. Well, let's do it. May it please you to make Zion prosper, rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, then you will want sacrifices offered in righteousness, burnt and whole offerings, then bulls will be offered on your altar. So I love this one because people will say inevitably, Ross, you're cheating. You're not. Look at that. It says, and I'm saying, let me ask you something. Do you think the same author wrote verse 20 and 21 that wrote 1 through 19? And the answer to that is I don't think it is the same author. I'll give you a quick point on this if you've missed this or hadn't heard this before. This is supposed to be from David, but yet this verse says Zion is not prospering and the walls are down, like it's been destroyed. So clearly this is a later author. And so to your point, Todd, there are times where we see different authors' hands in the text. And look, I know people get nervous about this, but it's very clear. can you imagine in the time of David, the zenith of sovereignty in the kingdom of Judah? I know the minimalist scholars try to downplay it, but we're finding more and more archaeologically that says, no. Jerusalem is thriving, right, in the time of David. So 10th century, 9th century BCE. So I just find it interesting that people read over this, and it's just clearly another hand. One more example, Todd. If you look at the footnote in this Jewish study Bible that I recommend all the time, it says the Psalm's conclusion suggests that the acceptability of prayer instead of sacrifice is due to a catastrophe which has made access to the temple impossible. Then it says many modern scholars see these verses as an addition, an opinion already cited in Ibn Ezra in the name of one of the Spanish scholars. Look, it's no secret that sacrifices an ancient people kissed. We know that ancient people sacrificed. My point is, does that reflect the Torah of Moses in its original form? So you picked up on it too. That's good. Sometimes I like that when someone tells me, no, I saw it too.
Yeah, we were listening to, I was letting her listen to, and I noticed in part of the conversation is just making a note here. I'm curious to see what happens when you do get to this part. But the law codes, chapter 12 through 26. Wow. But I did notice something too. I mentioned to her earlier is looking back at Freeman's book, which I'm kind of like you. There is a documentary hypothesis. Not quite sure if everything he does is correct, but it is interesting to kind of look into it in that perspective. But the very end of chapter 11 flows right into the very end of chapter 26. They flow together.
Yeah.
And of course, that's not the law code. The end of 26 is not the law code writer.
Right.
So I just thought that was kind of interesting too, but I'm curious to see where that goes when you get to that point.
I'm going to give you a quick little spoiler just because you guys are faithful and you're here with me on a Saturday afternoon. I'm going to seek to show evidence that chapter 12 through 26 are in their entirety an insertion. And I can show that because of what you just said. It's an interrupting of Moses. Chapter 11 is very clearly just talking, and Moses says, okay, when you go into the land, you're going to do this, and there's going to be these two mountains, Ebal and Gerizim, and then he says, hang on, let me give you 15 chapters of unrelated laws, and then in 27, it's like Moses says, oh, anyway, what I was saying a while back, and it's so I call this interrupting Moses. I'm not making fun. Please don't.
Right.
I got a note the other day. Someone very nicely said, I get the impression that your goal is to prove that Moses did not write the Pentateuch. And I talked to Seth about it, and I've talked to a couple other people. My goal, I could see how someone would say that, and they weren't being critical. They just felt like that, you log in every week and Ross says, no, Moses didn't write this. He didn't write that. And before long, some people are like, well, what do I have to hold on to? That's the goal of this. We're going to show what is holy, what is pure, what is original. And again, it's not that some of these other rules are not good and they're not good for society and they're not good. Some of these things are excellent for your health and your whatever. But the question is not that. The question is around authorship. So that's what we're really looking for. So it pleases me, Todd. I know you and Angel study really deep. I like to hear it when people say, yeah, I picked up on that right away. So
here's what you call Bible nerds.
That's right. We are Bible nerds. That'd be our new motto. Hey, stick around. I know you'll have some other insight.
All right.
Sue Wyatt. Hello, Sue. Shabbat Shalom. How are you, my friend?
Shabbat Shalom. Just a quick question for you, I hope. I'd like to get your take on Barry Page's assertion that there were three groups of priestly servitors in Israel, that there was a group that merged worship of Jehovah along with the pagan gods, a group that he calls the Aaronic that worshiped only Jehovah but included the sacrificial cult, and then the third group that he calls just the Levites, who preserved what we would call the Moses scroll and were purely monotheistic and non-sacrificial. Can you give me your take on that, please?
I sure can. First of all, I love Barry. Barry Page is a wonderful guy. He's a good friend of mine. We've known him for several years. His view is what I would define as a wrestling out of all of these difficult matters. So he presents a proposal, an answer. It doesn't have to be, if I can explain it this way, this is my view, it doesn't have to be the answer, but he proposes an answer for what he considers discrepancies in the text. So you've got all of these different ideas that the text seem to present to us. And one of the main things, I would recommend Barry's books. In fact, I'll post one in the Discord later, just so you have that link, and someone may want to help me and post it now. His latest, greatest. What he's doing is what people have done really since the 1700s, but even more so into the 19th century. And that is try to understand the different sources behind our present text. So I'm trying to answer it in the best way I can, Sue, but what I think he's trying to do and what he is doing is he's providing his answer to the different sources by saying we've got evidence of a group that he would call the Levites, and they have a certain status. We're going to get into this, by the way, as we go into Deuteronomy. And then you have this group called the Aaronids, or Aaron's descendants. You know, Aaron is only mentioned twice in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy does not give Aaron and the sons of Aaron the exalted status that the rest of the Pentateuch does. So in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, you see Levites are sort of a generic group of ministers, but within that group, the Aaron descendants are exalted. So he's come up with a way, an answer, a theory that says that at a certain time, this is where the breach occurred, this is where the break-off occurs, and that is just a matter of someone's opinion. I've looked at it, I've read it. I don't know that I could sign up to everything that he puts forward, nor could he sign up for everything I believe. But it is a good attempt to struggle through and understand the different sources. Does that make sense? All right. I think that it might. Maybe I lost you. Okay. I'll come back, Sue. James Tabor, how are you? Shabbat Shalom. Okay, he's just looking for the mute.
I had the same problem. I couldn't find the mute. And yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, good. You got it, James? There you go.
I'm embarrassed. I'm a Zoom expert, but I was trying to call up a Word doc and it was covering the screen, so I couldn't see.
I got you.
Anyway, I'm sure you've all done that if you've been teaching on Zoom. I just had a quick comment building off of Ross's idea of, I'm going to call it misquoting Moses. If you remember, Bart Ehrman has a book called Misquoting Jesus. And Ross and I have talked about this for 20 years now. But the methods that New Testament scholars began to develop in parallel really with Hebrew Bible scholars, mostly in Germany, but some very smart people in America as well, is just astounding, because what you are trying to do in the case, let me stay with Jesus a minute. Jesus interrupted, brilliant title.
Yeah.
built on the movie title, obviously. Picking up this cute little thing to sell books, which is cool. But when you think about it, if Jesus said some things, like red letter stuff, and then scribes and overwriters, let's say if we started with what we call the Q source, the earliest source, and then that's incorporated by Luke and Matthew, but with different ways, and then that's reincorporated in the Didache and so forth. He called it Jesus interrupted. And the process is so similar.
Mm-hmm.
You look for incongruities, gaps, the kind of thing that Friedman tallies in his introduction to The Sources Reveal, which I find is the quickest thing. We put it up before as a PDF
Yeah.
for people. And it's not like you're trying to tear it down. You're actually trying to get clues. Think of a deep forest. And whether it's Moses or Jesus, they've been through that forest and they've left a bread trail, should we say, yellow ribbons, whatever you want. And then all these other things have come along and it's dense and overgrown. I shouldn't use that analogy because that implies weeds and so forth. But let's just say, well, in some cases,
I
call it
like that analogy. I
I
think
like
a
it. And
sower.
actually, I believe a guy named Yeshua might have used that.
Absolutely.
An enemy has done this.
That's right.
The good word is so. The Ebionites love that story. They said, and then an enemy comes.
Yep.
Now, Ross is going to write a book. I've told him to do this for years. And I know it would be considered, I just built off Bart. Well, Bart built off a movie, okay?
Yeah.
So but he could say, I never heard of Bart's book. I got it from the movie. Moses Interrupted. It's so brilliant.
Yep.
I don't think we're there yet, but not just saying, here's the Moses scroll, but showing how he's interrupted. Now you got to go to Jeremiah 7. In the day I led you out of Egypt, I didn't command you concerning burnt offerings and sacrifices and blah, we've gone over that 100 times. So you got to go everywhere. You've also got to ask, what does Psalm 103 say? What does Psalm 104 say? If you had nothing else but those Psalms, what does it say about the Exodus?
Yep.
Is Miriam and Aaron and Moses mentioned? Yes. So things like that.
Yeah. Where do we have accounts of the plagues? Yeah, exactly. All of those.
So
details.
Ross has been, he knows I'm not trying to flatter him here, but frankly, I don't know of anybody, I just don't, that has delved into it the way he has, listening to the scholars more and more. I mean, he's ordering these BHS 5s and, getting the software. I mean, it's unbelievable. And he's my student, as he often says, so boy, am I proud if I could say that. But I'm a New Testament scholar. I'm a Greco-Roman religion scholar, as you know. But I mean, I got a degree that is sort of like Bible. I had to take many Hebrew Bible courses from top people at Chicago.
I got a bunch of your cool books on the Hebrew Bible
so
that
at
I'm
least
reading.
I can talk about it with some degree of expertise, but it's not my focus field, as you know. But the similarities are amazing. But what I want to emphasize is it's not destructive, it's positive. If I can take students in a freshman class raised in fundamentalist churches from North Carolina for 43 years and teach them how to read the Gospels critically and they love it, it has nothing to do with oh, well, then we just give up on Jesus if it's like that. No, we're trying to get to what was the original strand.
Absolutely.
And then actually tracing how it got modified is a very enlightening process because you realize what Morton Smith called parties and politics in the late Second Temple period. Now, he was working on the period I work on.
Mm-hmm.
Dead Sea Scrolls and all that. Ross is doing that too because it involves texts, it's the only text we have from the late Second Temple period of the Hebrew Bible and other texts. So it's not destructive. And I'm telling you, I can take these kids, and you guys are much beyond the kids because you've already struggled. This is not about losing your faith. You're going to have to figure out what your faith is. And I hope it's always grounded in the Creator God and the revelation through Moses and the prophets. I mean, that's where I am, and I'm 78 years old, and I'm not giving that up ever.
Yeah.
But what does that mean? Yeah, what does that mean? What does that imply? So what I tell the students is, if we're tracing, for example, the traditions of the Sermon on the Mount, and they're different, and Luke, frankly, is more original, that's a good thing to know. And what Matthew added, it's understandable. It's for liturgical reasons, like, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Okay, it's said in every church every Sunday in the world. I don't think that's added. But is it so bad? It's a doxology. So, Mark, doxology at the end of the prayer. You say, yeah, but did Jesus say it? You could say he said it, you could say he didn't. All I'm saying is there's two texts. One consistently shows it's earlier, the other consistently shows it's later. And I like, as Ernest Martin once said, I like all of them.
Yeah.
Even if some of them I don't agree with, like they might advocate animal sacrifice, which I'm not big of, but I want to know that that group was there operating. And the worst thing you can do, I'm telling you, it is a sin, is crush it all together and pretend it's all the same.
Right.
Because that's a lie. It's not all the same. But, well, this is this, and I could harmonize this. And, well, first of all, you actually can't unless you get really ridiculous, you know. So I just wanted to say that as a positive exhortation, if any of you are thinking, oh my God, what Ross said, like all he does is say, oh, well, he probably didn't say this and that. The whole idea, I always tell anyone who wants to hear, Abraham didn't have a Bible, so he wasn't doing this stuff. Moses didn't have a Bible. He said, well, he had some records. I said, a Bible. Like, he didn't have that. None of the people we're studying carried this. Okay. Thank God we have it, or we wouldn't even know their names, right? So we're a different generation. But they did just fine walking with God and keeping the commandments, as Genesis 26 says, probably a later source, but Moses obeyed my voice is the idea. So I just wanted to say that for anyone who might be thinking, where is this going? Is this like a shipwreck of faith? It is not. And you could believe, going back to my Christian student, you could believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, raised from the dead, sitting at the right hand of God and returning again, and still benefit greatly from how what he taught and said was developed through these different sources. And it doesn't stop with the New Testament. You've heard of the Didache, you've heard of the Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Philip, Gospel of Peter is I think as valuable as the Gospel of Mark in some ways. So anyway, that's my word for the day.
Hey, thanks, James. I appreciate you. I know your schedule is tight. I know you've got a lot going on, so I'm glad you joined us. But
well, it's the Sabbath, and this is the most as important as the other things I try to do on Shabbat.
Well, have a beautiful Shabbat. I know we've got a couple other people lined up to talk, and I can't wait to hear your points. One thing I wanted to say, those of you who've worked through, I mean, we've been doing publicly, we've been going through these texts and teaching on the annual cycle, the triennial cycle for way long time. I mean, almost 20 years now. So I'm excited that many of you are still on this journey with me, and we're looking at some things that are, I would say, deeper than what we've looked at in the past. It's why 2 years ago when I started this series, A New Look, the Pentateuch, A New Look, because I really think it's important to really look at things more closely than we have in the past. And there are a lot of speculations. We talked about just a moment ago, Sue asked me about my friend Barry Page. His is an approach. Richard Elliott Friedman is an approach. Joel Baden is an approach. We have a lot of wonderful new or young Hebrew Bible scholars. I like Brettler. Brettler's comments fill the pages of the Jewish Study Bible. So we're going to continue to look at these things. We're going to get into, over the course of this, things that we've covered in years past as we work through, but we're going and we're looking even more closely. For instance, everyone knows that ultimately, because I just said at the end of this class, my cliffhanger is that the Torah was lost. I mean, it was clearly lost. And we have hundreds of years attested by the biblical writers where look at my air quote, the Torah was not kept. And so what are we to do with all of this information? Well, that's part of the thing. We're going to talk about Josiah. In Josiah's day, there is the discovery of what is purported to be the scroll that Moses wrote. The Hebrew Bible actually says, from the hand of Moses. We're going to look at Kings. We're going to look at Chronicles. We're going to show what that looked like in that time, and we're going to be able to tell what that book consisted of. So when we get into some of this material related to Josiah's time, we know we had two prophets. We had Jeremiah, and we had another prophet. We'll leave that one out there for just a few minutes while people think about it. We had two prophets who were operating at the time. We have books in their name, and they told us a different version of things. So again, we're going to have to uncover every stone to get into I talk about it in this week's class, where is that scroll? And I left it with, that scroll is lost. So what else do we have? Next stuff is coming. Damon, Shabbat Shalom, welcome. Good to see you. Nice to meet you.
Shabbat Shalom. Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Just to give a brief bit of background before I launch in, I've done like 3 years of visiting a local synagogue, Reformed Jewish synagogue, just to learn how the Jews interpret the Bible themselves, because it's very different how Christians interpret it. They decided not to stop 1 year after finishing their yearly reading cycle of Genesis through Deuteronomy. I joined around mid-Judges. We got all the way through Ezra before I moved out of the area. So I got a tremendous education. And even though we didn't get so much into the author strands, which you're digging into, and I really appreciate it, it's excellent, I still learned quite a bit. And I learned about some of the politics that's in between the lines there and all that sort of
I'm sure.
all that sort of thing. But one comment that you made about Psalm 51 kind of caught my attention. And so I just wanted to weigh in on that briefly.
Sure.
Because I think that we can actually substantiate that could have been written by King David, and there's a justification why he might have known that the walls needed to be rebuilt. Part of that reason we see over in 1 Chronicles 25. He said that when he separated the singers of the Psalms, that they would prophesy with harps, stringed instruments, etc. In other words, they were going to be talking about things that were in the future, that were yet to come. That's one. The second thing is the covenant that God made with King David. He says in verse 10, let me find my verse 10. Moreover, I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, that they may dwell in a place of their own and not move any more, nor shall the sons of wickedness oppress them any more, as they had previously done, ever since the time that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel. So, up until this point in time, enemies had been attacking Israel. Finally, in verse 1.
Where are you at? I'm just trying to follow. Where are you? What chapter?
2 Samuel 7.
Okay, yeah.
So he gets to verse 1, and the Lord has now given David rest from all of his enemies. So the battle has ceased, and now Israel is firmly established in the land. And then God comes along and says, yes, in the future, I will firmly establish Israel in the land. What? Wait a second. So he's saying that even though he has peace now, even though Israel has been firmly established in the land, it's not permanent. And King David has got to wonder, why not? What's going on here? And I think what we need to do is trace the subtle strands that substantiate the answer to that question. And I think that's found in Deuteronomy, where we're talking about the cycle of exile and return. That King David would have gone back and realized, okay, yeah, there's a reason why that we're not planted in the land forever yet. That's because we haven't been exiled yet.
Yeah, there
So,
is a view. Obviously, your view that you just stated, at least to a certain degree, is very much there is a fundamentalist view that that answers more of an apologetic way, and I'm fine with that. I love that. I want to entertain the view that you just expressed by following subtle clues, but I also think some of those subtle clues lead us to different conclusions at times, or possible different conclusions than those acceptable answers. So one thing that a lot of people do is when they approach, whether they're studying with a Christian group or a Jewish group, that approach is often to explain everything existing in the Bible now to answer all of those questions as if they were all written, for instance, Psalm 51. The easy answer that a lot of people choose is, well, no, David actually wrote that too. But the same kind of thinking, and this is almost a question, Damon, as for the group, not just for you, but Deuteronomy 34, as you know, a lot of people say Moses wrote the 5 books. And yet Deuteronomy 34 says that Moses died and was buried, probably by God, I guess is one way to read that. So a lot of people think, well, Moses wrote that. The Talmud argues that he wrote it from his tears, through his tears. But the question becomes, and this is where we're getting into some possible other solutions. Could it be that someone else wrote? So the same thing goes with Psalm 51 and other texts. It doesn't have to be, nowhere does it say that one author has to write everything that is contained within a particular text. That's my point. So it's not to dismiss the possibility that you're right. Some would argue, just like you did, that David wrote that as well. So just wanted to make that point, that you're following subtle clues is excellent, superb. That's what I want to do too. But we want to look at all the possibilities. I think you would agree.
yes. So let me add one more thing, and then let me hand the baton to someone else.
All right.
I absolutely agree with you that someone else would have written that. And my hypothesis is it had to be someone who was there, who was witnessing what God was telling Moses there right before he died. So it's not a later biographer. That particular person right there had to have gone up the mountain with Moses and heard what God said to him. So my guess is Eleazar, the son of Aaron.
Yep. That's one possibility, of course. Do we? And then the question, and this is going to be fun. I'm glad you're with us, because these are the kind of questions that I like to entertain. Is, okay, so if Eleazar is the one, then do we have any indication from the text that anyone was with Moses and that knew the way to his grave, where it says that no man knows of his sepulcher unto this day, except maybe Eleazar? So what do we have? That's the evidence. And we're looking. Look, this is a fun exercise. I know you and I corresponded a little bit privately, and I think I really respect the idea that you, like me and so many others on this list, are interested in digging deeply into these texts and considering, weighing, looking at the different options. So, hey, I'm glad to see you here. I know your schedule is busy, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us. Nice to meet you in this way.
You too.
Hey, Patty Tyler. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov.
Shabbat Shalom. Before I make my comment, I just want to say to Todd and Angel Keaton here, I have the little video clip of you sitting there, and what I thought you were holding a snake, but it ended up being the cat's tail. I just wanted to say that I'm so glad it's not a snake.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, well, I just have a comment, and I just want to say that what a beautiful and important approach this is that Ross is taking. I'm like a collector of quotes and wisdom and things like that online. And one of my favorites that's going around is that if you want to find the love within yourself, remove everything that isn't love. And I feel that's the same way with the truth. And what we're doing here is, if you want to find the words of Moses or the words of God, remove everything that isn't that. And then
Good
you
point.
can add what you have left. And so there's this process of elimination, I think that Ross is doing, and he's done a really good job of it, is let's look at what we have, what's left. And I think that we're all going to be amazed at the beauty and the simplicity of this Torah law that Moses was given, and it was given to all of us. And that's all. I just want to say thank you.
Hey, thanks, Patty. Good observations. And you and I, we have obviously been studying together for a long time. But I tell you, there is something to that quote. I like the idea. I am not in any way artistic. I've seen people who can carve, beautiful statues. And I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was Leonardo da Vinci, or it could be Leonardo DiCaprio for all I know. But somebody said that the way that when you look at some beautiful statue of, say, Michelangelo, the artist takes away everything that is not the thing that he's making. And so that's the idea. It's to remove the things that are clearly added. And we know it just so happens to coincide with the discovery of the real scroll of Moses, that at that time, Jeremiah says, the lying pen of the scribes has made the Torah a lie. Now, I know people don't like to hear that. They didn't like to hear it in Jeremiah's day either. They wanted to kill him, in fact. So, I get a little bit of hate mail too. But mostly what I get are people trying to vindicate a text which represents a later evolution of the text. And in so doing, I think, in the goodness of their desire, they seek to defend, they think they're doing the right thing by defending the text as it is. But what I'm trying to do is very respectfully say, hold on. If we look at Deuteronomy, for instance, we're dealing not just with the Masoretic text. Yes, the Masoretic text is a great place to start. It's where I start. And most of our English translations are based on Masoretic texts, some earlier manuscripts, some not. But the idea is that when you begin there and then you say, wait a minute, the Septuagint reads this, or the Samaritan Pentateuch reads this, or this text, or what do we have at Qumran? It becomes a lot more interesting that we have these different choices. And even within the text of the Bible, Kings will read one thing, Chronicles does not agree. So what do? We have to look at all these different clues as we're searching for the original teaching of Moses. Karen, hey, it's good to have you back. Shabbat Shalom. You've been running all over the country, posting cool pictures of the family. How's it going?
Good. So I like to look at the biblical text from a more, critical thinking view.
Okay.
And, I think that the early, especially Genesis, there's some kind of shared knowledge there that they're recording, because you see similar things in other cultures in that story. And then, then that comes, the story of us. Everyone wants to hear their own story. And so the rest of it is, this is what happened to Israel. This is, Israeli history, like American history. And so I'm always trying to look and see when did the religion come in? When did this, this story get organized into some sacrificial cult? And I see some divisions here and there, like during the time of Solomon, there's the two priests, Zadok and Abiathar.
Yep.
And, Zadok sort of takes over during the time of Solomon. And then after Solomon, there's, what we would consider a huge church split, right?
Mm-hmm.
The northern kingdom separates, and then you don't really hear much from Israel other than, it was, some interactions with the king or some stuff here and there. Mostly it's the story of Judah after that.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go into captivity, and then they come back, and I can see where alterations could happen in a few different places. During the time of Solomon, the house of David gets elevated above all else. And then Northern Kingdom just goes away. So I can see where things get put in these different places. And so I just kind of look at it from a more humanist, critical standpoint.
And this is
trying to
good.
figure out.
No, it's good to have the different views. So your view, and I know because we've talked about some of the things that you've gotten into in your studies and research, and we look at comparative religious studies. People say, well, where do we get the story of the creation? And people argue that and so forth. But you get that story. You have other stories in the pre-Diluvian. You got the Epic of Gilgamesh. You have these various different stories that have survived in some form or another, some from Sumerian text, cuneiform tablets, whatever. So we're looking at all of these different examples, and I think it's good to have these discussions. People have different views, and I don't know of another place where people are allowed to, I mean, I'm sure there are, but I don't know of many where people can say, well, I believe that this is preserved the way, perfectly, not a jot or tittle, everything is perfect. And then you have someone else in the group that says, well, I mean, we've got 75 texts of this particular manuscript piece attested in antiquity, and none of them agree. So I think that this is healthy. It's a good discussion, and it's fun. I mean, I enjoy it. I think it's great. Because what I try to do is say, here is what I'm proposing. I said this several times, even in the teaching today. But because years ago, I would say, this is the way this is. It could not be another way. And let me tell you why. And I'm through with that because I've learned over time that there are possibilities we must consider. And that's what makes it very interesting. So I'm looking for some interesting dialogue, especially as we get more into this subject. So
Yeah.
Karen, go ahead.
Other members, I'll say something like that, and other members will send me a video of some rabbi, trying to set me straight. And I think a lot of the attitude comes from this desire to elevate men, to put them on a pedestal. And I'll hear it all the time, that the ancient rabbis, whether it's Rashi or Ramban, they had some kind of supernatural understanding of things that we just don't have today. And I find that to be a ridiculous argument.
True.
We have far more resources today and understanding than they had. So, that's going to be, a hill I die on there. But, so it's kind of hard to, I don't want to say have a conversation, but my standpoint is much different than many others because I don't hold a lot of the ancient scholars in as high up of an opinion as others do.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Or modern teachers, me or anyone else. I think that the beauty of this exercise is that it is an exercise, and we all. I say this all the time. I'm not teaching a group of students and novices. What I usually attract in these classes is a group of people who've been researching these things for decades. And so, but a lot of times, like you, Karen, I'll hear somebody say, well, who are you to argue with Christianity or Judaism? Did you not know that the rabbis have been studying this for thousands of years? And the answer to that is, no, they haven't. The ones who recorded their views, whether in church or synagogue, are standing on the shoulders of others, like you. I mean, you're younger than I am, Karen, much younger, but, I can say I've been studying this material for however many decades, and someone else has, and so did Rashi, and so did Nachmanides, and and so forth and so on. So, but we have a lot of information that others didn't have, particularly when it comes to the biblical text. And this is what's so exciting. When I look at the Masoretic text, which everyone bases their views, I say everyone, most religious fundamentalists base their religion on, they look at that and they go, this is the word, the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Every jot, every tittle, it's perfect. Well, that was the critics at the time in 1945. Remember, the Dead Sea Scrolls are discovered winter of 46, 47, the first Dead Sea Scrolls. I actually know of one that was before that, a few before that. But the idea is that most people said the Bible, the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, the oldest complete copy only dated to 1008 of the Common Era, AD for my Christian friends. So 1008 was the oldest complete copy of the whole Hebrew Bible. Now, you discover the Dead Sea Scrolls, we've carbon dated some of these scrolls of manuscripts of the Bible date back 1,000 years earlier than that. So for people to be very fundamentalist in their approach, I can love them and I can have a good conversation with them and I can let them present their views and we can discuss their views. But I also want people to understand that there is more to these questions than a lot of people have admitted. So I want to dig. I want to continue to research, and I want to ask questions. If we look at Deuteronomy, can we discern different layers, different time frames within Deuteronomy? Of course we can. Very, very, very clearly. Can we see differences between Exodus and Deuteronomy? Of course we can. We have a lot of those, and that's the thing that we're bringing up when we do this research. So, I mean, I love it when I meet people like this group who are all into this and studying the same tough questions I am. Because I think I learn most when someone says, I disagree, here's my view, and I say, well, let's talk about it. Good stuff. What else, Karen?
I always remind them, anybody can say anything. Thanks for the video.
Hey, that's right. That's right. Thanks. That's right. Anybody can say anything. My view, your view, which is right. Well, let's see which one the text supports. I think that's fun. That's the fun part. Are you going to be with us a while, or you got a future trip lined? You don't have to tell me secrets on, in front of all these people, but you going to be gone or here? Or?
No, I'm going to be here for a while.
Outstanding. Outstanding. I always appreciate your input. Thank you, Karen. Miriam, Shabbat Shalom. All you have to do is unmute, and man, I hope this thing works perfectly.
Shabbat Shalom.
I got you. That's perfect. Hey, Miriam.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Karen. You are always so fabulous. Okay. But that leads into my understanding of the scriptures and what we talked about today. But my focus is on Numbers 5.
Okay.
And we talk about Numbers 5, and it talks about, well, they're in the wilderness, okay, wandering, and in 5 it talks about the purity or defilement of the camp, and to I guess how to cleanse. But a lot is focused on that chapter, on the woman.
Yeah.
And her role.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's called what? Sota?
Yeah, that's right. The Sota, yeah.
Sota, okay. But I want to state I'm not feminist, okay?
Okay.
But I just want to bring attention to this since it was in the study today. Why just the woman that can sin? I mean, okay, I don't see nothing even in this chapter that says, okay, a man can do this and this can be accountable to him and whatever. Pull me up. Okay, laughing. Okay,
I'm with you. I'm tracking. I know where you're going with this.
okay. But that focus is just that whole chapter basically on what a woman would do wrong and none other.
So if I can jump in here,
Yeah.
your question, I've heard people say, so hang on just a second. A man thinks his woman has been with another man and he can bring her to the priest and she's going to drink some water with dirt from the floor. And if she is guilty of committing this trespass against her husband, then her various translations of this, but basically her insides are going to explode. I mean, it's going to be gruesome. And so your question is, well, what about the man? When does the man who's been unfaithful get pulled in front of the priest and have to drink that water? Is that kind of what you're going at? Why don't the man have to do it?
Amen.
Amen. Well, I tell you what, the world would be a much better place and more accurately following God's ways if men stuck with the woman that they intended to be with and didn't run around. But I'll tell you, first of all, I'm not going to get into the critical views of this text. Let's deal with it just as it is for this one. And one thing that is very important to understand, according to the text that we have as we're given them, notice how I preface that, it's that a man can have, according to the biblical text, I'm not advocating this, can have more than one woman. So, but what does that mean? Well, there are some stipulations. There are some governing points about that. A man can't have more than one woman if any of the women belong to another man. So let me just say it this way. If a woman belongs to another man, a man can't have that woman. That's that is what adultery is. Now, look, I know that people have defined it different ways and so forth. I certainly follow a very strict view of that. I don't, because I'm married, I don't desire another woman, and I'm more afraid of Bridget killing me than I am getting struck by the heavens. So even if I thought to stray, I wouldn't stray. Bridget, on the other hand, jokingly one time told me that I could have as many women as I wanted as long as they helped around the house. So, but we have different views on this. But biblically, to commit adultery is simply this: for a man to take a woman that belongs to another man. That's why we have examples where men had more than one woman. Now, interestingly enough, a later text, the text of the king, I'm going to show this when we get into that, the Torah of the king, Deuteronomy 17, verse 14 through 20, says that a king can't multiply women. Now, what we see in the text is that, guess what the kings do more often than not? They multiply women. Even David multiplies women. It's a big problem. In Deuteronomy 17, you can't multiply women. Well, the Dead Sea Scrolls and the community rule, there's this big discussion, and this comes up. And the question is this: hey, I thought that a man is only supposed to have one woman. Why is it that David does that? And you know what the answer is? In the community rule, it says, because David had not read the scroll of Moses, which had been sealed. And it gives a date according to the biblical narrative. We're going to unpack that in a future class and show that the reference in the Dead Sea Scrolls points us to one of the clues as to when the Torah gets lost. But the question becomes this: did David know that he shouldn't multiply women and he did it anyway? So do we think that David really knew about Deuteronomy 17, that he made a copy of it and he kept it and read from it every day? So back to Numbers chapter 5 and the Sota. A man is not, according to the priestly writer, going to be dragged in front of the priest for having had intercourse with another woman because there's already a rule for that. According to the priestly writer, as long as a man doesn't take another man's woman, he can have multiple women. So now the king is the exception to that. They're not supposed to multiply women, but we have the patriarchs. Think about it. Now, you can read those stories and go, well, that ought to be a lesson for you. Abraham, Isaac, well, not Isaac. Isaac doesn't do this, and his life at least doesn't have those kind of problems. But you have Jacob, who has 4 women. And boy, that's some problems there. So anyway, I get it. I've had actually other people have posed that question. I think, to be fair, that whoever cheats ought to be brought up before the priest and have to drink that dirt water.
Amen.
And you're one of those people. I hear you. All
My
right, well,
last question.
Yeah, go ahead.
My last question. Was this presented from the lying pen of the scribe, Moshe, or Yahweh's ruling?
I think if I only had to go with your 3 choices there, I would say that pen of the scribe's choice would be my choice. But what I would argue, even maybe to take the tone a little bit softer for those who already want to throw tomatoes at me, I would say it's a later addition to the text. It is a very priestly document. It's very magical. It's something that we don't see very much in the Torah, in the Tanakh, at all. We don't see a lot. We see some examples of things that seem outside the scope of what we would expect in Hebrew religion. This is, for a lot of reasons, Numbers chapter 5, the mystery of the Sota. It is considered by many scholars to be a late priestly addition. So, again, now, why does it come in? Look, I tell you what, it could be a whole number of reasons. This is raw speculating. So please, this is just me thinking out loud. If you want to keep society going the way it should go, I think it ought to be like the Dead Sea Scrolls group said, and Jesus of Nazareth says this too: one man, one woman. And I think they ought to be faithful. And I think they should not cheat, man or woman, whether you have to drink water from the dirt floor of the tabernacle or not. Because how many of us, some of us I've been married to the same woman for a long, long time, have 6 kids, but a lot of people have been divorced, and things have happened in their marriages that I can't even begin to understand or appreciate. But I feel for it. But how many relationships today are ruined because a man or a woman can't remain faithful to the person that they made a vow to? And I think that is, in my opinion, one of the gravest sins in our world today, is violating that sacred trust and cheating on a spouse, man or woman. I think it's wicked as hell. And I think that if people didn't do it, the world would be a better place. How many children's lives are ruined because mama or daddy, I wanted to say something bad, wants to act a fool? So that's my thoughts.
Excellent, Ross. Shabbat shalom, and thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. I appreciate you very much. Thank you very much. Shabbat shalom. Julia. How are you, my sister? Got to unmute. I think you might be like others today looking for that mute button. There we go.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I did try. I found it, but a couple of times it did say the host isn't allowing, and then
that's right. That's right. I forgot about that little trick. So it was me, but it wasn't that I didn't want to hear you. I just forgot. Sorry.
I am very happy that I have come behind Karen and Miriam.
Okay.
I think that when Miriam brought that up, one of the things that came to my mind is, first and foremost, is that God is righteous. And when you read that, it makes you go, what? And I think that if there is something that makes you go, what? Then it's okay. Then the questioning is not wrong. I think that, and one of the ways I've said it is, if we've had someone or religion that says something that's very different than what we are reading, for me, it's like it's a 90-degree angle. When it says don't go to the right or the left, it's like a 90-degree angle. They just veer off the path so very fast. And my whole thing was, it was written very in your face by Jeremiah when he said the lying pen of the scribe.
Yeah.
So whether it's written that way or whether it is being talked about the way you do it in a much more diplomatic way, for whatever reason, that for good or ill, that there may have been additions, God said for a reason, don't add to or take away from.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that I think he also took into account that people's justification for doing it would still be, I was just trying to help. I thought this addition would be a good thing. He didn't say, don't add to or take away from unless you have really good reasons for it. He said, don't do it.
Right.
Because you end up to the left or the right in the weeds just by meandering off the same way the ones did that went 90 degrees. And you end up standing to the right of the left saying, how did I get here with them? And it's like, but I had a good reason. I wasn't trying to do. And the instruction was don't add to. And that is because this is exactly what can happen. What can happen is your good intentions will still get you to the wrong place. And then you're in there standing there saying, but I had a good reason for it. And the answer would be, but I said don't add to and don't take away from.
What is that expression? Everybody knows it. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Yeah.
God, and he knows all of us. So for us to think, I was just trying to help, but the instruction was not to. And I think that it is because this very thing, what you are doing is showing, because you're not coming up with new things. You're showing in ancient writings that there may have been these additions, which means when this structure was being built, if we take it and look at it as time, when the foundations were being laid, there were already things being done. That is the reason why an inspector will come in and say, this building is unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
And it is because these things were added. And I think what you're doing is trying to show we have to be mindful enough to understand that this may have been done. And it doesn't mean that the whole thing is a lie, but it means that you have to be aware that this can be done, may have been done, and that there are consequences to that.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to kind of go along with what you're saying, I know that the fundamentalist view is very well known by me and many others. I know very much so the view that the Bible as we have it, if you could get back to the Hebrew and Greek, that is the inspired, inerrant, authoritative Word of God. I grew up with that. I did this little exercise where you flop your Bible and you say that and you preach it from the pulpits around the land. And we look, I spent, I don't know how many couple of decades, I guess, in that world where my whole point was to say, no, there's no problems here. Look, you just don't understand that this is the answer to that question. And I had fundamental questions and fundamental answers to go with them. But then when I really broke away from, look, I studied with Christians, I studied with Jews, I studied with Reform, I studied with Orthodox. I've toured the land of Israel with Orthodox Jews, and I bought into those stories, and I've been there. Just like many of you, I've been there, and I've got the T-shirt. But within the text, just reading the Bible, what I began to see is that within the text, we have discrepancies.
Yeah.
And these, like you said, it doesn't have to be malicious or an ill intent. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying, like people often ask me, wait a minute, are you telling me that God is not capable of keeping his word without error? Well, error. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that it wasn't kept without error.
Mm-hmm.
And that is obvious. I mean, when you have two texts, Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5, both claiming to be, these are the words that the Lord spoke on the day of assembly and so forth, and Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5, put them side by side, they don't even match.
Yeah.
Now, you go, well, yeah, they basically say the same thing. These claim to be the very words that God spoke from the mountain on the day of assembly, from the midst of the fire, and he later wrote them on tablets of stone.
Yeah.
Now, when I see things like that, that is, it's a flag. When I see the account of Kings and Chronicles side by side, look, I know I've told you this. This is on my website. The greatest, probably of the I don't know how many thousands of books are in my library. This is one of the best books that I've ever worked in. I use it every week because it demonstrates what you're talking about. So look, go ahead.
I think that if we understand what I think what we're going to be left with when we understand this is that what God is letting us know is that every individual is responsible to do certain things. And that means if you find out the truth, you cannot turn away and say, I'm going to believe this, because then it's on you. If you did not know, I understand. But because it is uncomfortable for you to say, I'm not going to look at it, you have made the choice not to. You will not be able to stand on that. Every individual, God knows us all. And it's every individual. Once you know the truth, even if it is uncomfortable, even if it makes you feel a certain way, even if, you are then responsible.
Yep.
That's all.
Hey, that's some good stuff. That's, and it really comes down to, again, I want to make this clear. I love the biblical text, but I also recognize that within these texts, we have tendencies, we have editorial comments that are really obvious. And those of you who've been studying with me for a few years know that we've at least discussed that. You may not agree with me, and that's fine. Look, this is not agree with Ross or else. This is let's discuss. But what you'll see is that most people who don't agree with the fact that we have evidence of editorial work in the text, they're really going to always approach it from a fundamentalist reasoning. So a circular reasoning. So they'll say, no, we know that this is the hand of David because it says here in this text that David did this. Well, maybe, but maybe that is a later addition. Let's look at the whole text and let's bring in evidence and really weigh it. It's an exercise that is important. We shouldn't take lightly, but I think that it's valuable if our goal is for the right reason, and we're not doing this just to be mean or pick at the Bible or throw stones. But let's get back to what was the authentic message. So, for instance, I'm more interested in knowing what Moses said than Eliezer. That's just me.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in Moses than any of Job's friends. But a lot of people, will give the same authority to the entire Hebrew Bible. Which one is more important, the 10 words, the 10 commandments, or other laws? Now, Judaism came away with this idea, and they said, no, there's no difference. All laws are of equal weight. Well, is that a biblical principle, or is that something that rabbinic sages taught? There's a way to approach the text from a biblical, allowing the Bible to interpret the Bible, even when the Bible disagrees with the Bible. There's a way to look at those texts, and there's a way to say, I can't have discrepancy, so I will now, for my next trick, I will now attempt to make it all make sense so that the problem goes away. And that's the job of a fundamentalist and an apologist. So I think that's important to know where we stand on these things. So I appreciate you, Julia. Yeah, go ahead.
Because maybe what's supposed to happen is that the problem is not supposed to go away. Maybe the problem went away for too long.
Yep.
And now it's time for this discernment to happen.
Yeah.
That it's time to start to separate and to say and to understand that there are some differences, that there is discernment, and that this is what we must do.
Let me ask you this, Julia, because it goes with your question. Something to think about, or everyone, and think about this. Let's say that Jeremiah said that the lying pen of, who are we to say that we are wise and the Torah of the Lord is with us when the lying pen of the scribes has made it a lie? Let's say that Jeremiah, a prophet of God, said that. And let's assume that that's a fairly accurate translation. And let's then assume that by Torah, he means Torah. And let's continue to think through that and say that when he says that a lying pen has made the Torah into a lie, let's go with that and say we agree with that. Then let's say, what if I said there's no lie in the Torah? What if by defending the book and ignoring obvious signs of other authors, what if we have been part of defending something which has been added?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah. Especially when some of it says God commanded.
Yeah.
I mean, that may be part of why you said don't add to, because suppose someone wanted to add to when they have this really good explanation, justification for doing it. But while they were doing it, they said, but if I just say me, maybe they won't understand it. And this is so good that I need to put this under God commanded. Already that's a no-no.
Yeah.
Because in fact, God did not command, and you did that, and the justification stands right there. But if it was just me, they would not have taken it. I understand, and God understands that because he knows us all, which is why he said don't. Like I understand all the explanations that could possibly come down, and what it will do is lead to this building that is unsafe. And we look what has happened. And then if they could just be sitting on the side of God and says, look what happened hundreds of years later. And he goes, but that's not what I intended. It's like, but that is why I said, you can't see, you can't know, I can. So what I'm going to tell you is don't.
Yeah.
You don't need an explanation because you don't know all the things that can happen that I do. So just don't add to.
That's it. And don't take from. Both of those, by the way.
That's right.
Both of those, by the way, are Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 4:2 and Deuteronomy 13:1 or 12:32, whether you're English or Hebrew.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you all.
Hey, good stuff. I appreciate you. Your comments are always insightful, Julia. Thank you very much. Todd and Angel. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on just a second. I think I have to ask to unmute. There you go.
Ah, there we are.
There it is.
I think Julia was reading my mind.
She was. She's good at that.
Stole my thunder, man. Nah, it's kidding. The Father said he would test us.
Deuteronomy 13.
And especially the Deuteronomy 13 test, but he also said he would test us. And why wouldn't this be a test? We already, as far as ourselves, we've already come to the conclusion Paul's a test. Either love him or you love Paul.
Yeah.
So it's to discern what is added or what is not added or anything, I think is part of the test. You have to take his character into mind. Does this sound like something he would do or he would allow? And then versus, well, this right here makes perfect sense because it's simple, it's easy to follow, and not 613 or whatever it is. It just makes sense to me that, like what she was saying, don't add to or take away from. One of the things I ran across this morning, we got the book that you suggested on the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah.
And on page 5, this was interesting. I'm sure you're familiar with this. But when he says in here, we're just talking about documentary hypothesis, but
which book? Which book? I missed it. Which one?
This is the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh, yeah.
Of the Bible.
Yep, love it. Yep.
And on page 5, kind of cutting halfway through the sentence here, we are most likely left with this conclusion: the narratives and the law codes that now constitute the Torah were composed through a repeated process of older traditions being retold in a new context and a new form, with the resulting composition on the one hand faithful to the spirit of the old traditions and their intent, and on the other hand creatively revised to teach the people and help guide their future destiny. I read that first thing I thought it was you saying last week, tradition.
Yeah.
But
yep.
Yes, I just thought that was interesting that he put that in there.
Here's the thing. If someone asked me about Barry Page's view, we have different discussions. We're talking, look, I want to attract a group of people to have the discussion. Some are fundamentalists, some are more academic, some are, any number of places along the way, because I think it's important, but it's important to hear that this is what the academic view is. You don't have to accept the academic view. Someone might say, look, all academic, this isn't a wrong statement, but some have said, because I've been in discussions where somebody'd say, yeah, well, academics are agnostic and atheist, and they don't even believe in God. And I am a Jew, I am a Christian, I am a whatever, and so I don't want to hear anything they have to say. Well, I get that, but let's at least look at every possible understanding. I spent decades of my life looking for making sense of Genesis through Revelation and showing connections. This is where Jesus is in the Torah. This is where he's at in the prophets. This is where, I spent a lot of my time. And what I used to say is, there are no mistakes in the text, Ross. If I talk to myself, not that I did that, but I'm just saying. But my point would be, if you don't understand it, it's not a mistake in the text. Your understanding is wrong. So there's no discrepancies. You just have to look harder. There is an underlying connection that you're missing. And I did that for a long time. But that just wasn't true.
Right.
We do have textual difficulties. And we just have to be honest to Moses, honest to God, and honest with the books that we were given, and we're going to be in a better place for it. Look, a lot of people say, I keep the Torah, and the answer to that is, respectfully, no, you don't. And no, I don't. You know, if you read it as a book, biblical religion is not kept. And don't feel bad about that, if I can say it that way. They didn't keep it from the time of Joshua or the time of the judges until the time of Josiah. And I would argue that they didn't even keep it then, according to the prophets. You know,
Yeah,
there's this big discussion in Kings and Chronicles. There's a great revival going on. And you take your microphone on the street and you go, hey, Jeremiah, I'm Ross from CNN or wherever. I just said that. See if I could get some of your hair standing up. Some of you don't like CNN.
It worked.
Or I'm from Fox, or I'm from my own news station. Hey, Jeremiah, let me ask you something. There's word that in Jerusalem there's a great revival going on. It's talked about in Kings and Chronicles. Can you speak to that? He'd say, what are you talking about? There's no revival going on here. This place is going down. This place is going to the dogs. The enemy's coming. These people have rejected God, and the temple is going to be destroyed. It's going to be, and people are like, what? Did you hear Jeremiah? Take him and kill him. Look, the people who stand against that, are.
Did you do that?
Who did that? The people who stand against that are those who haven't read it properly. So, hey, good stuff as always. Did I cut you off or did I let you finish?
Matt, we're good.
All right, good deal. Hey, Clody, Shabbat Shalom. Oh, let me see. I'm going to ask you to unmute. There we go.
Yes.
There we go.
Hi.
Hey.
Shabbat Shalom. So, I think that I lost you in a moment. So I think that many of the things that I was thinking are already said because I just, I lost my connection when Miriam was talking, and I really wanted to start from some point there in Numbers 5. And if we remember what Nikita was saying the last week, she was telling to you that if we know somebody really well, we know that something is in or out of character for him or her.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this Numbers 5 is out of character for God. I don't think that God would allow some innocent person to eat or drink water with dirt. I don't think that's fair. So having this in mind, I was refreshing your book, the Moses Scroll.
Yeah.
And I remember that the scholars were presenting two kinds of arguments against the authenticity of the Moses Scrolls, and that was the first one. I'm saying it in my English. I'm not an academic.
Yep.
So the first one was the outer, the structure, the whatever grammatical, punctual or where it was found. These are all out. But the insider's point of view is the other one was the insiders, which means the content analysis. So you analyze the content and you say, could that be real?
Yeah.
Could that be something that God would have asked from people? So I think that many of these paragraphs of the priestly laws, if we make just a a content analysis, like at least we do script analysis in my profession in acting. If we do script analysis, we will understand that I'm sorry, it's bogus. It's something that it's unreal. It can't be. I don't ever think that God would have asked from an innocent woman to drink water. Or there are some other things, like I don't think that God would have asked from parents to give their sons to die, or their children, because they were not honoring them. And that is because we know that God historically has forgiven people. We see that he has forgiven us when we were in wrong, but we still are living to make a better self of ourselves. And also we've seen in David's, King David's example, or in Moses' example, God is a loving God, that he is not so easily angered. He's slow to anger. So I don't think that many of those rules are inside his character. So what I think this series are good for, I think that this series are good to prove this hunch that we have. And I think that we are already in the epoch that the Torah is already written in our hearts. So perhaps I think that we, as Karen was saying, we might know a lot to discern right from wrong. We might know better than we think we know. So yeah.
Now you've said some things that I mean, I would say amen to most of that. I think that what I hear though when I say things like, you know, I tell people, look, I study this, I read it carefully, I pray, I meditate, I work through, and then some things stand out and I go, And you know, a lot of people say, well, you're just picking and choosing. You're just picking and choosing, and you've come up with things that you don't agree with, and therefore, you know, you just say that wasn't authentic to the Torah. So, you know, and I've taught many classes on like sacrifices, and it's not that I don't know how to read. It's not that I can't see in the text that there are plenty of texts which say, hey, bring this sacrifice forward. But within the text, I also feel the tension that is evident in other texts which say, I did not desire that. You know, you can't say, I don't delight in chocolate. And then a few minutes later, I say, man, I really delight in chocolate.
I need an offer every day, 365 grammars of
chocolate,
black chocolate, morning,
yep.
midday, and evening. Yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah, so I find myself saying that. I don't need chocolate, but man, sometimes there's nothing that helps the craving. So,
yeah.
But and again, I know some might think, well, that's a little bit edgy. You're making fun, but my point is that you get these tensions in the text, and you at times when I'm reading, I'll think, you know, there are reasons I don't think that was part of the authentic, and it's mainly because elsewhere in the same book, in the same text, which also claims to be true and right and holy, it disagrees with another text.
Exactly.
Now,
exactly.
I know the fundamentalist apologist viewpoints that people say, well, you haven't looked at it like I've looked at it. I've been studying these things for years. And I want to hear those respectfully. I want somebody to present those, but chances are we've heard those arguments, and they simply don't address the problems. We're going to get into in Deuteronomy, not only, you know, people are talking about Numbers 5, but we're going to get into some of these laws and show that they absolutely are other texts which absolutely contradict. Are you supposed to boil? Are you supposed to boil the Passover? Are you supposed to roast it over fire and not boil it? Well, it depends on which one you read. So we're going to get into that. And the purpose, like you said, Clody, is to get at what can we discern from the authentic.
Sorry, I also had closing point.
Good.
And that's like an invitation to each and every one of us to remember. I'm the novice here. I started to read the Bible seriously 7 years ago. I think I'm one of the youngest here, as in biblically studying. So, but I do remember when I started to seriously discern what is happening in the Bible and what is God actually searching from us. So I remember the moment when I started to make the difference in between Old Testament and New Testament.
Yeah.
And I remember that when I started to understand and to realize Ruach Elohim, the Spirit of Yehovah, the Spirit of the Lord made that to me after some serious dedication from my part. I remember the point where I was crying myself to sleep when I understood how many lies the religion is telling people.
Yeah.
And that's traumatic and that's so painful. If we remember how painful it was, but we were like, it's okay, it's painful, but I'm gonna go to the end of this rabbit hole, you say?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to the end. I'm not gonna stay here and get out of my ways of loving God and believing in God. I want to believe in God. I want to have faith in God. And then we were searching all over the place where we could support ourselves so that we can still love God. And that's how we went to the Torah roots beliefs. And that's how we went to the 10 Commandments. So I think that is the faith that we should have throughout this course. We should have the same kind of faith that we had in the beginning. Wow, I'm quoting again Jesus. I can't believe it.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah. So we have to have the same love that we had in the beginning of this deep Bible diving, because the emunah is to know that God will show us the way. Even
Yes.
if we feel lost, even if we feel like we are going to lose everything that we have, let us not throw the Bible. God will show us the way. Let's love the Bible. Let's be honest to Moses, to ourselves, to the way that we read New Testament. And then we will see that God is gonna show us the way, and we are gonna see that big and big and bigger and bigger and bigger light.
I love it, and I appreciate so much what you're saying. It really is. It is a love story. I mean, I've told people in that cabinet right across the room, there's a Torah scroll, and I love that Torah scroll. But you know what I love even more? I have a little King James Bible that's in there that I got in 1972 as a little boy. To me, that's my heart. And there are times to this day, I tell people, because we collectively have been in this a long time, and we all love the biblical text. When I memorized a lot of the Bible verses as a child, it was for me the King James Version. So a lot of times I'll go pick up a King James and I'll just read it, and it just brings tears because that's what I fell in love with. Now, I can read the Hebrew now. I mean, it's not, I can work in the Hebrew, even where I don't claim to be a super duper Hebrew person, but I can work in the Hebrew, and I can use tools to look at the Hebrew. But sometimes it's like the nostalgia of if you've ever been in love and the person that you were in love with took you to a place, a restaurant, a bar, whatever. And that place has been seared into your heart as the place where all of these memories happened. For me, I hope this is okay to make this connection. That's the King James. Like I hear people say, well, the King James Version is, what? Just shut up. I mean, really, yeah, I love the Strong's Concordance, even though people say, well, Strong's has got some problems. And yeah, well, the guy sat down and he gave the Hebrew and Greek word for every word in the Bible. What have you done in your life, So, but I think you're right. I think it's what, as the song says, what's love got to do with this? It's got everything to do with it. We are seeking to restore, to kindle that faith with the God that we first committed to be in a relationship with, even when bad things have happened in the relationship. And let me tell you, there have been a few bad things. There have been preachers that have lied. There have been rabbis who have lied. There have been teachers of the Bible and books that we've read that have interfered with our relationship with God. And let me tell you, there are misunderstandings of the biblical text which have presented a wrong view of the God that we love and seek to serve. And we have to be brave enough to say, I'm fixing this relationship. I'm going to go back in and I'm going to work through this and do everything that I can to understand God. And I think that's what we're doing. As a group, it's what we're doing. Oh, I may have to invite you again. Okay. Come on.
Amen. I just wanted to say amen. And I also wanted to say that sometimes many of those lies might even be unintentional.
I agree.
So let's not hate.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Don't get
Shabbat
so
shalom.
upset.
Thank
That's
you.
right. All right. Shabbat shalom. Nikita, I'm going to ask you to unmute. How are you? Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. Good to hear you.
Wonderful. Good to be heard. How you doing, Ross?
I am doing great. I got your email. Everything's cool.
Thank you. I appreciate your understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's I always say this, and I know you get tired of hearing it, but I stand in awe. I stand in awe of this group. I'm so blessed to be a part of it, simply because a lot of us, no matter where we're from, we've been on all these parallel paths to get to where we are now. And when it intersects, I mean, because Julia, Cody, Karen, Sister Elisheva, even you, I'm like, there's got to be a million cameras in my house because y'all are watching me and talking about stuff that I do here, and it's ridiculous. Especially, and I'm like, it's been a long time. Like I said before with you, I've been listening to you, and the stuff that, like Cody just said, the prayers that she had prayed, Julia, I got to the point to where I just wanted the truth. I didn't care what it was.
Yep.
If it had even got to the point to where there was no God or whatever I had to come to, and when you get to that point, when you want him that badly, I think at that point, that's when he can begin to teach you.
Amen.
Because until you get there, you're too busy running from pillar to post, listening to, you jump denominations.
Yeah.
Then you jump whole religions altogether. And you're like, okay, that's not true. That can't be true. That can't. I had, when I was much younger, I visited a congregation where this gentleman was preaching, saying that an abomination, that the Most High said it was an abomination, was okay. And his reason for doing it was because he had discovered, he was one of a generation of preachers. He had discovered that his grandfather had participated in it. So instead of saying, well, your grandfather did wrong, he was going to make the word of the Most High wrong in order to clean up the reputation of his grandfather.
Yep.
So you never know what creed or what denomination, whatever they're doing to try to justify the behavior of their creed and beliefs. Like, don't bow down to graven images. And one of the biggest denominations that we know of, that's all they have.
That's right.
They're all over the place. If they're not a stone graven image, they're in the glass of the windows of the sanctuary.
That's right.
So it's all about the credibility of authority. When you get to a point, you like Cody was mentioning, that verse and Miriam, the Sota, that has no credibility of authority to me. Because when you stand in each the shoes of each person involved, something is unrighteous. Someone will be done wrong, and the Most High has absolutely no motivation to do us wrong. He has no agenda for that because he's not a thief. There's nothing that we have that he can't take or hasn't given us. So and that was one of the biggest things that separated me from my prior faith, because I'm like, the Most High, the God of the original Testament, the original scriptures, and the God of the quote unquote new, they're not the same, because the God that wrote the law will not give you a scapegoat to avoid it.
Yeah.
That makes absolutely no sense. He wrote the law for our benefit so we can learn how to be righteous in order to commune with him. So if we make a mistake, we have to be corrected. Okay, and he's not so unrighteous to not allow the correction.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my mother wouldn't spank me if she hadn't already told me what not to do.
Yeah.
That would be unrighteous. And God knows I gave her plenty of reasons to do what she did. And I understand that as an adult. But, you know, as a child, the ego wants to do what the ego wants to do.
Yeah.
And that's part of a lot of, like that preacher I was telling you about and his grandfather. Instead of admitting grandfather was wrong or admitting that I was wrong, he was wrong, he would rather try to change the word of the Most High. And I'm like, how dare you?
Right.
How dare you? And that's one of the biggest things about coming to the Most High is our egos. Because a lot of us, I know a couple that came to the Most High in their 60s, and they had big problems with their families because they were very religious families. So the family said, so you're going to tell me everyone in the family is wrong but you? You're going to tell me thousands and thousands of traditions of Catholics and Paul, of course, Paul, everybody's wrong but you, huh? I said, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because when you have a personal relationship with the Most High, he teaches you. Look, I don't know what kind of relationship you have with who you have, but I've humbled myself before his throne. And one of the biggest points that helped me the most was when the Most High spoke to my spirit and said, do not talk to anyone else about me for this season.
Yeah.
Pray only to me. Tell no one your prayers. If you do that and your prayer gets answered, you know who did it. If you're asking everybody from every denomination in the world to pray for you and that prayer gets answered, who you going to thank? Move in silence. The Most High will make or give you the opportunity to use what he's done for you as a testament to him once he does it, and you absolutely know this, the training wheels. I don't have the faith of Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob. They had their personal relationships with the Most High, and their testimonies are in the original scriptures. The things that the Most High I know has personally done for me, no one would probably believe. I mean, I scratch my head a lot. I got a good strong hole in my scalp right now. But you can't shake me from that, because I know through all of the puzzle pieces that he gave me individually, and I put it together, there it was. It all pointed directly to him.
Yep.
So it's just the fear. And some people have fears with this contextual criticism, is that they're going to lose the relationship they feel like they have now.
Oh, yeah. And look, a lot of us have invested a lot of time in putting all these puzzle pieces together. Look, a lot of us, you mentioned people going from one religion to the other. I think it's fascinating that when you talk to people and you say, well, Sister Nikita, why aren't you going to that church anymore? Why are you doing this? And you know, a lot of times the answer that I've heard people say in our walk is, well, I just wasn't being fed there. And isn't that interesting that the prophet Amos talks about a day when there's coming a famine, not a famine of bread and water, though our world suffers from that too, but this is a famine of hearing the words of God. And part of the problem is that they're being fed other food. In this, look, I'm not going to lie to you. I love a Reese's cup. I will eat a Reese's cup even when I know that I shouldn't. I'm not saying you can't, because I certainly like them, but there's a point in which you say, is that really a good nutritional thing? Are there things that are better for me Well, this whole thing about this famine, I think the world, religious world, is eating unhealthy foods fed to them by their lack of interest in getting down and reading the word themselves, and just going and sitting in a church or a synagogue, participating in a study and taking everything in that they're telling them. I think that's part of the problem.
That's a great deal of the problem. But when you're comfortable, when a religion or a faith-based system gives you a permanent scapegoat for anything and everything you do,
Yep.
you give over your conscience to that because you're free to, use that license to sin.
Yep.
That's what hit me the hardest when I was like, wait a minute, because in the New Testament, the law is a bad thing. Oh, you're trying to go by the law and you're trying to use works. Why would the Most High give us a bad thing? No, the law is to help us learn righteousness. But if you got a scapegoat that's going to absolve you of everything, David did not get away with anything.
Yeah.
David, the most, when Nathan says, God has set aside your sin, it's like when you're in a court of law and you got 2 counts against you, one for murder and one for jaywalking. By the time you finish the penalty for murder, you're dead and can't do the one for jaywalking. So when he said the Lord has set aside your sin, it was the most minor one that you did, because by the time you finish with this, you will be dead.
Yeah.
I mean, when he said the sword would never leave your house, I mean, never is a long time, so you don't have time to pay for the debt of those other sins.
That's a mighty long time.
Yeah, his sentences ran currently, as opposed to consecutively.
Mm-hmm.
And forgiveness does not excuse you. That's why a lot of Christians, a lot of people from my former faith have been discouraged, because they're like, I thought my sins were paid for and I'm going through all of this and all my prayers and all that. I said, forgiveness does not excuse you.
Yeah.
So what was the point of having a scapegoat if you have to repent still? The Most High wants your attention that way. Okay, I've said more than enough.
Hey, you said some good stuff. I appreciate it. I always appreciate your comments. Thank you, my sister. Good stuff.
Thank you, my brother.
Have a beautiful rest of your Shabbat. Hey, Karen. All right, hang on. Let me push my button. All right, ask you to unmute. There you are.
Okay, so I want to talk about what the 10 words does, in my opinion. It gives you back the power to take responsibility for your own actions.
Yep.
In religion, they try to protect you from yourself. Even, if we're looking at priests, we're looking at monarchs, they make all these laws, and it almost takes your own responsibility away.
Sure.
So let's say I'm an alcoholic. I'm going to go to the bar. I want to go to the bar. So the priest goes in, tells the bartender, you got to take all the alcohol down and put it under the bar, because so-and-so is coming in and we need to protect him from himself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, or this man has a wandering eye, so all women now have to wear a giant black tent over their heads.
Yeah.
So he can't look at them.
That's a good. And don't forget down to the wrist too.
Oh yeah.
You can't show those ankles, because some men evidently can't even look at an ankle without losing control. I don't know who those men are, but
that makes them weak. There's a certain famous psychologist who I'm not going to name, but he says, what makes a good man is the man that has the choice to do violence and chooses not to.
Yeah.
And a bad man is the one who doesn't have the choice.
You can call his name. That's Jordan Peterson. I recognize that. Yeah.
And, I find that to be very true. And I find the 10 words to be almost a threat to a priesthood and a monarchy, because they give the person back that responsibility for their own actions. Like, I can go into any situation and I can trust myself.
Yeah.
Because I made a covenant with the creator of all things. I've chosen to follow the 10 words. And so nothing's going to bother me.
Yeah.
I think that a strong, healthy person, and those who are constantly blaming and expecting other people to protect them from themselves is just it's proven to be not a good way to go. It makes a society of weak, toxic, evil people.
Amen. I tell you what, you and I agree on that. On a lot of stuff, but on that in particular, there are a lot of weak men and weak women. Now, I'm not saying that all of us are not susceptible to temptation and things like that, but if we are responsible for our own success and failures according to how well we live up to these rules and expectations, and it's not someone else's fault, like to what Nikita was saying. I don't have a scapegoat. No one says, well, Ross, you can live like the devil because I did it for you. Nobody said that to me. The text certainly didn't tell me that. And by the same token, if I fail, if I do things contrary to what God says, I don't have anybody to blame.
Right.
It's not like I can say, well, I mean, if that woman hadn't walked by with her from her elbows down uncovered, then I wouldn't have lusted after her. That's not her fault. So it's just we have to be strong and do our best to stand on this word as we understand it. And I think this group is willing to make that commitment. That's what's good about it.
So that was my thoughts on the drinking the ink and taking responsibility for your own actions.
Yeah, drinking the ink. That's an interesting question. When I talked to Nehemiah, we did an interview on the scroll, and we were talking about one statement about the Moses scroll and about the ink, and how Shapiro made a comment. He knew manuscripts. He was, in his day, he was bringing hundreds of those from around the world to museums, and he made a comment about the ink. He said, the ink is virtually, he called it indestructible. Like you can't, it's unbelievable. Well, Nehemiah said, well, based on what you just said, that might be an indication that it's late, that it's a fake, because here's what we know about this. And then as we talked, we got into more discussion. He said, well, there are some inks that are ancient that are virtually in it. So, no, but people look for this particular understanding, and he brought up this ink. There is a teaching in Judaism that talks about how that ink, this is not in the Bible, but supposedly, according to tradition, this is what Nehemiah was bringing up, the priest would write on the little piece of scroll about the Sota that had this curse. Like if you cheated on, if you slept with the neighbor or whatever, and the priest would write on there, if this woman cheated on her husband, then let these words, make her guts explode or whatever. I don't know what it said, but something like that. And then you put the little piece of paper or a scroll in the water, and then the words dissipate, just wash off, and then you drink the water and you just drank the curse. Well, see, that's magical mumbo jumbo to me. It doesn't, like Clody said, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't go with the other stuff. So anyway, I would agree. We have to be strong, stand up, be resolute, and seek to live our life according to it as best we understand. What else, Karen?
No, that's just my 2 cents.
That's some good 2 cents.
Okay.
All right. Shabbat shalom. Todd and Angel.
Yeah, kind of adding on to what Nikita was talking about. As far as when you go to the New Testament and we don't do the law, this, that, and the other, and everything. Well, that was strictly Paul. But when Yeshua came, the church preaches that the truth that he came to claim or talk about, whatever, was the gospel. The way we see it, he was teaching the truths of Torah. That was the truth, because look how much he got into it with the priests.
Yeah.
And of course, they're the ones that killed him.
Absolutely.
But I don't know. It's just in church. It's really hard to open your eyes and see stuff like that. And at one slight point, and I think this is why the pastor turned on us as quick as he did. I think at one slight point we had him questioning.
Oh yeah,
we didn't do it intentionally. We didn't do it intentionally at all. Matter of fact, we didn't even come to him to begin with the Paul thing. We just was telling him there's something that we're studying that we don't think belongs in what's going on around here. And of course, he was just kind of like, "Oh, really?" It's like, "Yeah, but we're not going to mention it right now because we're trying to figure it out." But once he did, though, he says, "Well, I kind of agree why he would say one thing and turn around and say another. It does make sense." And the very next week, I mean, he attacked us.
He
It was done in
basically
secret. I mean,
is that where they give you the left foot of fellowship, they call it?
No, actually, without mentioning our names, he made us his sermon was about us for 3 straight weeks.
A little passive aggressive thing.
Oh yeah, he was. People around here sowing discord.
They call that a beta male.
Yeah. But yeah, well, apparently we were sowing discord when he was the only one that we talked to. So.
So you knew where it came from. It wasn't like.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, how many times though have we seen? Sometimes those people ultimately come around. I mean, I don't know if it's going to happen with this guy. It may not ever, but sometimes it does. People say, you made me think, and I wasn't ready for it at that time. I had a guy at the conference this year, a friend of mine, who said, there are times where I have to get up and leave. Like, I don't listen to you for a couple of weeks, and then I'll come back. And I get that. I mean, he wasn't being mean. He wasn't being ugly. He just said, I can take you in doses. And so I get that. I mean, the only person that has to she has, is Bridget. She's the only one that has put up with me this long. But most people do take a break from me. They got to get away. So, but you never know. Sometimes these people will come back and they'll show back up in our life and they'll say, I've been thinking about what you said and it really makes sense.
Yeah, I still remember the very last Sunday that he did that because she mentioned to me, if he talks about us again, we're done. And I thought we were already at the door anyway, but as I was walking out the door and shook his hand and everything, looked at him, I said, "You're having a blast with this, ain't you?" And he just kind of looked at me kind of funny. I said, "I got all that in high school. I'm used to it."
Yeah. We're done. Well, I tell you, though, it's the good thing about this group. You're going to see people come and people go. And even in the Discord, look, we want people to come as you are. And you can tell immediately when someone is just becoming aware of us, or maybe they're not really interested in what is going on in our group or our discussions, but they're still presenting things from a very fundamentalist view. They're testing the water, and that's okay. I try to be very open and inviting and allow that to continue. I try not to push anybody away, mainly because of Ezekiel 34. It's one of the most powerful texts that I think we can read when it comes to dealing with people who are trying to find their way. Ezekiel 34, it'll put you on the floor. Because, it basically just says that I gave you clean water to drink, and now you're going to muddy the water with your filthy feet, or you're going to push away the sheep. You better be inviting. So that's what I love about this group, is that all of you, no matter where you're at, I'd say most of you have seen whatever somebody could put in front of us, and you're willing to let them work through it and offer them kind words to think through. So that's good. We're not going to be like that pastor and I mean, really, and pick on someone about their beliefs until they go away. We're just going to say, well, here's what I think. What are your thoughts? So,
you know what the sad part is? He took us for a tour of the church. This is during all the virus stuff.
Yeah.
And because we're the only ones that even showed up. And we basically told him, so, we've never even actually been around the church. It's not a big church. So he was kind of taking us, showed us a whole upstairs full of classrooms that haven't been used for years. And actually, most of the church was empty. I mean, just it hadn't been used. And he basically, I forgot how the conversation got started, but I think we both might have been talking to him about covering other subjects or something like this, that, and the other. And why we left the church before is because we just weren't being fed. And we were starting to wake up a little bit. And he basically told us, plain. He said, well, they pay me here to keep it simple. So that's what I do. I just tell them things just to keep it simple. And I'm sort of thinking, wow, it kind of brings back to preachers shouldn't be making money because they can be persuaded.
Yep.
Because of that. And I was kind of like, man, it's sad if you think about it, but every week you could pretty much know exactly what he's getting ready to say. And that's we started catching on to it, because he started everything the same, he ended everything the same verses, Revelation 21, like, golly, man. And they liked it.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. Like I told you before, that we had Sunday school in the sanctuary as well. And he would always start off, anybody have any questions? And of course, everybody would look at us. But the funny thing is, the questions that the other people would ask, I kind of felt like I was in first grade. I mean, it really, and I'm not trying to make fun of them. I'm not.
I know.
But you can tell by what they're used to being fed, and this is the preachers even before him, that what they're used to being fed is what's kept them at that level.
Yep.
And just the questions were just, I was kind of like, wow. I mean,
I know.
It's sad that they're kept like that, but that's what they like. They have itching ears. That's what they want to hear.
Well, a lot of people do. I mean, a lot of people pay preachers or teachers to keep it simple, and there are tons of websites and YouTube channels and that do just that. In fact, Seth works very hard for us to help us get this message out, and he's so talented. If he were on any of these other YouTube channels, there would be no doubt a lot of viewers, and the viewership would be higher and the subscribers would be higher. I know that. But look, it's not a popular message. And, if you think about Jeremiah, I love Jeremiah, all of you know that, but Jeremiah 15, he says, when your words were found, I ate them. And I think because he means literally, when your words were found, I ate them. Like when the scroll was discovered, he consumed it and it became a joy to him. But you know what he also says? I sat alone. He said, I sat alone. I sit alone right here. I mean, I have a lot of friends, all of you, but I don't go out and do anything else. We don't take time off. This is what we do because it's, for us, the most important thing in the world is working through the most important thing in the world. This is what this is about. And if we can do this respectfully and invite different opinions and allow people to work through it, even if it's only 5 or 10 or 100 or 500 people, to me, that's important. Some of these channels are putting out videos and they have 1 million views. But I think it sometimes is the difference in eating cheese puffs, versus a well-rounded meal.
Yeah.
Look, I like cheese puffs, so you guys are going to think I eat horribly. I do sometimes, but that's the idea, is that you mentioned just a moment ago, you told that pastor, we left because we weren't getting fed. I said that earlier. That's what so many of us, there is a famine. And look, it's not a popular message all the time to teach people. I mean, look, if you said, all right, Ross, we're going to have to come up with a ministry program. You said, well, I'm going to tell people that some of what they believed is not true. I'm going to show them where some texts that they considered to be inspired by God are not inspired by God. That's not a real good plan for success in the way that most people think, right? So,
that's true.
Anyway, but it's worth it when we all come together and we have these discussions. So,
yeah, we just thought it was interesting that because we had prayed years ago for truth to show us the truth. And it was interesting that within just a couple of months, we felt like we were being convicted to leave that first church.
Yeah.
and which was kind of a hard thing for me to do 20 years in the church band. And that's the only gig I had since I retired. And I was kind of like, man, these guys in the band are my buddies, and just kind of hard. And he was really coming down hard on us. Leave.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow. So it's kind of interesting that I started listening to this guy on the radio. But since we left, there's nobody here.
Yeah.
And we have checked on YouTube a couple of the Messianic churches around here, and just curiosity. And oh man, they are just full of tradition.
Yeah.
And so we were just like, nope, that's not what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And so,
it's hard. I mean, it's hard because you want to fellowship, and you want to sing, and you want to praise, and you want to do that corporately. But let's face it, a lot comes with that. You have to say, is it worth it? I mean, I have people, I've told people my kids in many ways are spiritual orphans because the older ones moved around as we tried this, quit that, and then the younger ones, we just weren't going. I mean, I was glued to books. I was studying. We do, so what do they believe? Well, I mean, it's unfortunately, I wrecked our family in some ways. And so I've had to think, what's the better way to do it? Would it be better to have stayed? I mean, these are questions I've entertained. Should I have stayed in one of these places, or should we have converted to some form of Judaism? All those questions were there. And I have people that ask me now, I have children, what do I do? And I say, man, I don't know. I mean, it's sad. I have ideas now that I didn't have then, but all those things, and fellowship and friends, but sometimes I think you'll hear it from almost everybody you talk to in this group. You have to be alone. You have to be quiet. You have to do the best you can to get through it. It's hard. It's hard. But on the other end, I think the reward is great.
Yeah, I think it's starting to come around with some of my friends and stuff that are big into fishing like I am. And of course, they're always like, well, what time do you want to meet Saturday? Can't.
Yeah.
It's Shabbat. What? It's like, you used to always fish on Saturdays. Yeah, that was my mistake.
Yeah, I know.
So, be glad to hook up with you on Sunday. Don't you go to church? No.
Yeah.
So,
free Sunday.
It takes people a while to get used to, what you do. But fortunately for me, none of them make fun of me about it. They're just kind of like, well, that's your Sabbath. That's cool. If you want to do this, well, it's not mine.
Yeah, if you want to do it on Saturday and not Sunday, I guess that's all right. I mean, whatever.
Yeah. If y'all want to go Saturday, go right ahead. I said, but that's, can't do that. But
good stuff. Look, Miriam said, remember Abraham's call. That's right, Miriam. He was one when God called him. And Jeremiah says, I sat alone. How many times do we read that? It is a lonely walk, but then there is a time described by Malachi where all those who gathered together and talk about his name and his fame and, and so forth, that there is a book of remembrance that's written. And I think this potentially could be something like that in a way. I know it certainly is for many of us. So
you never know.
Hey, thanks for all your comments, Todd and Angel. I appreciate y'all. Eric John Nagel, I'm going to let you bring us out for the day. We've been going for hours, and I've been holding out like a preacher waiting at the altar call for that one soul that needs to come forward, and it was you. I knew it was you. I didn't really, but I'm glad it was. Let me ask you to unmute and get you up here.
Two quick things to finish off, if that's what we do.
Yep.
It seems to me we, as a group, each individual has to have been on, or am still in, the wilderness by ourselves, as so many others that we read about and study about have to do in their lifetimes. So it's obvious to me you have to be birds of the feather, as they say.
Yeah.
And before that, some of the discussion led me to remember Nehemiah teaching about his mountaintop experience.
Yeah.
And his little prayer. Yehovah, teach me what you hate and what you love. And let that be what I do. Thank you.
Hey, good stuff. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate your insights, Eric. Good stuff. And if we could do that, learn what the Lord hates and what the Lord loves, and try to direct and organize our lives accordingly, that would be a better world. Look, we're talking about Torah. Torah, as we talked about today, means direction, instruction, teaching, to throw, to shoot. It's all those things that deal with direction. Every person, all we like sheep have gone astray. All of us. It's like we're all lost in a way. And what do you do when you're lost? You look for direction. And I think that's where it is that sets us apart. It's not that we're smarter. It's not that we're better looking. It's not that we're funnier or that we know more. None of those things. I think the thing that saves us is that more than anything else, we desire to know the truth and to learn to live our lives according to the directions. I think that's the key. And the more that we do that, and we respectfully challenge things that we've been told, look, it's not going to be easy. God never promised us a rose garden, I think is an old song lyric. But it started in a garden. The problem is that in that garden, people chose to do their own thing. What we have to do is turn to God and seek His will in everything. So that's our job. Our job is to take care of the garden. You think about that. Why did God create man? It doesn't say, let us make man to worship us. You know what God made man for? To serve, right? To serve the garden, basically, to serve and protect. And so what happens is over time, weeds did grow up. And so our job is to take care of that garden. And look, if this represents the thing which God planted here on earth, then our job is to discern between the fruit, the leaves, the healthy vegetation, and the weeds and the thorns and the thistles. Now, I might let them all grow up together until the harvest, but I'm going to identify. You want somebody around you that says, "Oh, no, I wouldn't eat that, man. That's poison or whatever." You want somebody to know that. So we need to look at what is the original and what does it look like in that garden. Let's all go to the garden. Join me next week, and I'm looking forward to this as we talk about a lot of things that were lost, not just Moses' Torah, which was lost. I'm going to show that very clearly. But other things that we learned about as being very important to God in the Word are lost now. So what do we do with all those things? I'm going to talk about the Urim and the Tumim and the Ark of the Covenant and the two tablets. Really, if an outsider wanted to make fun and say, so wait a minute, let me get this straight. Telling me that God wrote on 2 stone tablets, gave it to me, but you don't have the stone tablets. No, but they were there. You saw them? Well, I didn't see them. Well, what about the ark? You said they put them in the ark? Yeah. Where's the ark? The ark's missing. Well, what about this Torah? It's missing too. It's starting to, you could see how a critic would look at it and say, it sounds a little bit like Mormonism. So what do we do? We're going to talk about that next week. In the meantime, Monday, for those of you members of the Yachad, we're going to kick back off, God willing, our Hebrew study on Monday and several other things. So stay tuned. We're starting to get our feet back under us, and this place is coming together slowly but surely. A lot of work we've been doing. So I'll meet you in the Discord throughout the week, and God bless you. See you next time.